all the biggest SEO news from the last month, including Google bringing preferred sources to AI search, Google launching search profiles, AI reporting coming for UK-based websites in Google Search Console, Google Business Profile now directly connecting to GA4, and German courts ruling that Google can be found liable for AI overview results. All of that coming up on this week's episode of Search with Candour. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour. I am your host, Jack Chambers-Ward, and this is one of our monthly news episodes where I'll run down the biggest SEO news from the last month. I'm going to dive into all things that happened in June 2026, and it's a lot of Google news, unsurprisingly. Obviously, we're working in the search and SEO industry here, but there's a lot happening at Google when it comes to the kind of metrics and the kind of features that they're rolling out. Before I get to all of the latest news, please do like and subscribe and do all of the usual YouTube stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit subscribe, use that notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we publish a new episode every single Monday. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a review and let us know what you think of the show in the comments down below as well. Without any further ado, I'm going to get stuck in straight away. Let's talk about preferred sources, shall we? And preferred sources is a feature that was quite prevalent in Google Discover and was launched a little while ago, and has become very, very popular for a lot of publishers to ensure that their users are subscribing to them, to the right publishers. This is now appearing in AI search, so AI mode and AI overviews as well. If you're not watching this, if you are just experiencing this via audio, I am actually sharing all of the things on screen as I'm talking about them. But if you do want to read the articles yourself, you can go down to the video description or the show notes with this episode and go and check them out yourself directly as well. So, like I said, this is preferred sources, a feature from Google Discover coming to AI mode and AI overviews. As we look here, there is basically an option for publishers to register, and you basically let them know, hey, I am a publisher and I want to be featured on preferred sources, and users can then add your site to preferred sources. Basically, they type in your domain and they're like, yep, I want to regularly see your content, and it highlights you in a section that is basically labeled out. And it's an interesting thing, I think, because it feels more like a Discover feature, right? It feels more like that social media feed kind of thing that we see so much from Google Discover. But I think it's really interesting because we get a lot of these kind of features now bleeding over into AI mode and AI overviews. You can see some examples here of what it looks like. So if you select preferred sources, you actually get a little designation like preferred next to the domain there, which I think is very, very cool. And basically the links in AI responses get that little label if they are in your selected preferred thing. And there is a whole sort of like documentation stuff. I mentioned, funny enough, this in my Brighton SEO talk last year. That was focused on the Google Discover side of things. This is now even more relevant. I'll be doing a talk coming up at OM conference in October that will be discussing this exact thing. And this is a real kind of, yeah, like I said, lean towards the social media kind of things, giving you more prominent links and more visibility in people's feeds when it comes to AI mode, in their chats and their conversations, and even things like highly cited being a thing here. So this is a not part of the preferred sources, but another element where a lot of people are referring to it. Then you can see that a lot of other stories and a lot of other publishers and articles are referring to it. You can see what's influential and what's not. I think these are nice little labels. But I think preferred sources is definitely something if you're making regular content on your website, if you're publishing regular content on your website, you should be doing this. And there's actually a button you can add to your website that is like, add me as a preferred source kind of thing. We have already had these conversations with our clients. And I think it is definitely something you should be doing if you are publishing informational content regularly. You should be thinking about doing this preferred sources option for you to be more heavily featured, especially if you know you have a loyal audience. If you know you have the kind of audience that wants to specifically get information from you, this is the perfect opportunity for that. This is a real way to harness and focus and ensure that your audience are fully engaged with what you are doing and essentially subscribing to you like they would a YouTube or a podcast and things like that. Next up, we have a new profile for creators to highlight their work on search. Surprise, surprise, right? This is more of this very similar kind of thing where we're seeing Google trying to give publishers and creators ways to highlight themselves without relying directly on the organic algorithm. And I think this is interesting because this feels quite like knowledge panel. They mentioned knowledge panel there, and this is part of the knowledge panel section, and you actually get to, craft your own little profile, essentially, kind of like a social media profile. Funnily enough, I keep saying social media because these seem to be where these features and elements are stealing ideas from, for want of a better phrase. This is, of course, on Google Discover as well, as we were talking about just now. This is Google's kind of version of the social media feed, and you can access this if you are a notable publisher. I think it's rolling out just for notable publishers in the US at the moment. You can register yourself and ensure that you are basically able to use a thing called a search profile. And it is essentially a profile page like you would see on Instagram or X or LinkedIn or whatever it is. You get a little bio, you can follow people. There's a little animation here. It gives you like your websites and other social links and recent content and all that kind of stuff. It is basically literally a little social media profile. I think that works quite well. Again, if we're treating Discover and now seemingly AI mode as a way to follow creators you care about, way to track information from publishers you want to be aware of, the ability to follow and subscribe and all that kind of stuff, I think is really, really cool if enough people use it. And that is the huge caveat here, right? This is where a lot of this comes down to. It's like, yeah, cool, this is a lovely idea. Thanks, Google. Are people actually using this service? Are people actually using this feature? Do normal, everyday people actually know that preferred sources and social profiles are a thing in order for them to even find it and use it? That is the big question I have. I am not sure how many people that aren't, SEOs or aware of what's going on in search and very aware of that are actually using this kind of thing. Because it's not really something you can accidentally stumble upon. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously this is launching from the creator side for big creators, but do people know that this exists from a normal everyday user kind of perspective? I'm not convinced. I like the idea. I like the way Google are integrating this kind of more social media-y kind of Google Discover style feed into things like AI mode. But I'm still not convinced that this is actually the right thing to, rebuild traffic to publishers, if that's even possible at this point. Anyway, I'll stop ranting. We'll talk about some very interesting things. Let's get into some reporting, shall we? So this is Search Console data that will give you AI performance reports, generative AI performance reports. So this will basically help you to understand your site's visibility within generative AI stuff, AI overviews, AI mode, and also the AI features in Discover as well. It is included in the overall performance report. So like those numbers include that automatically. However, this is, rolling out. They said they're doing tests and stuff at the moment. So don't expect to see this anytime soon. This is still in beta and kind of behind the scenes with Search Console. But it is kind of what you expect. They're showing you impressions here. They give you an idea of the kind of impressions, what pages are getting those kind of impressions. There's a under search results performance report. You get a generative AI performance report there as well. Notice there's no clicks mentioned here, no click-through rate or anything like that. I would imagine they probably don't want to talk about that because the numbers are not good. So it's focused very much on impressions here. Again, I'll get into this a bit more later on. We've already talked about Bing, but I'll get into my last stories about Bing here and there, AI visibility data. This is the step in the right direction from Google. We talked a lot about the transparency of data from Google, the lack of transparency of data from Google. You get things, as I mentioned here, impressions, pages, countries, devices, and dates. Cool. We're not getting queries. We're not getting nuanced data that would help us be more strategic, if you see what I mean. Compare that to, in fact, I might skip ahead. I'm going to go crazy and skip ahead. We'll move on to Bing AI visibility tools, because don't get me wrong, I think this is cool. This is heading in the right direction. But what Bing is doing is way more interesting. So Bing Webmaster Tools, if you haven't already, please go and set up a Bing Webmaster Tools for your website or for your client. It is, sure, not as big of a deal as the usual things we have with Google numbers. You're not going to get the same amount of traffic. You're not going to get the same amount of numbers, of course. But some of the insights and some of the tools from Bing Webmaster Tools are so useful, and it's all completely free as well. This is legit one of the only ways to get genuine AI visibility insights directly from search data. There are plenty of tools out there. They're all third-party tools. This is first-party data from Bing itself. So they have added 4 new capabilities: intents, topics, citation share, and a comparison tool as well. So the original rollout of the AI performance report had some cool features, was kind of giving you a share of voice kind of thing. This is a little bit more in depth, and we actually, if I zoom in here, if you're watching at home, you can actually see intent, topic, citations, and citation share as the columns here. So you can see what the grounding queries are for that, and then what kind of intent that is. Is it informational? Is it local? Event-based? They've got comparison, navigational in there as well. Then this essentially categorizes it: learn and solve, research, creation, and a few other types of intents as well. We're getting official intent data from a search company. Why aren't people freaking out about this? I know because it's Bing. I know because Bing's not cool and Bing's not as big as Google and it's not crazy. Google doesn't do any of this stuff. We are not getting any intent data from Google. This is like kind of crazy to me. And you should be doing this right now. Seeing visibility through topics. Again, this is essentially clustering. Bing is doing clustering of your data for you if you look in their AI performance reports. That is wild. This is really juicy information. If you have clients, if you have a website, if you are big and big enough to get usable data from Bing, do this stuff like today, like yesterday. You need to be having a look at this AI performance report, trust me. So the topics, this will basically give you, like I said, clustering in a way. You can now understand what kind of areas you are most visible in and which ones are getting the most citations and things like that. You can then understand where your gaps are in terms of coverage and all that kind of stuff. You probably know what I'm talking about when it comes to topics and like, topic clustering and stuff like that. Except Google isn't doing that. Bing is doing that for you. Next up is citation share. So obviously they had total citation, the citation count previously. This shows how much of the citation space your domain or your site receives for a specific grounding query. So it's the percent, I'll read it off here, the official calculation if you're not watching on YouTube. It is calculated as a percentage of citations attributed to your site out of all citations shown across all sites for that same grounding query. So you can understand not just how many times you're being cited, but how visible are you compared to the other companies and other brands and other websites. In theory, your competitors, right? How visible are you compared to them? When people search for this kind of thing and you're taking up 60% of the space compared to everyone else doing like 5 and 10%, that's game changing. That's huge. It's not a ranking thing or anything like that, but it gives you a representative idea of how often your site is being cited in AI results on Bing. It's really cool. It's really interesting data. I think it's really worth people exploring more in more detail. Then, of course, we have a comparison tool. I feel like this kind of should have come day one, personally, but like, always nice to see comparison stuff. I'll get onto some, we talked about some comparison stuff later on, because Google Trends now has comparison data, if you didn't already know. I will discuss that in a later episode, don't worry. But now you can do 30-day period comparisons and actually see and compare how much your total citations and your average cited pages have changed over time. Very cool. Again, it feels like something that should have been included, but I'm not going to turn my nose up at something that is a very, very useful metric. If you're doing month-on-month analysis, if you're doing like client reporting and stuff like that, this stuff is really, really handy. And like I said, if you're not already using Bing Webmaster Tools, you're missing out on a lot of cool insights. And last but not least, I guess, they talk about transparency. So this is why I think Bing are trying to separate themselves from Google when it comes to this sort of thing. They're trying to give us more data. They're trying to give us more of a direct perspective about how our sites are being represented in AI search. Credit to them, right? I think this is very cool. I think this is very nice, very innovative, as often is the case from Bing. They do cool stuff, and then because Google isn't doing it, nobody cares. And then Google will either copy them or adapt them or whatever, and then suddenly people care. I'm telling you right now, get in on the ground floor for this stuff so you can get these insights, and when it is relevant, think about how you can apply that across different search platforms. And again, broadly speaking, good SEO is good GEO, good AI search optimization, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying you should change your strategy based on big data. I'm saying you should get as much data as you can, and this is one of the only first-hand sources of AI search data that you can get, and it's totally free. There's basically no excuse not to do it, right? Another thing I thought was really interesting, and I can't believe it's taken this long, and I saw people like Darren Shaw and Claire Carlisle talking about this recently. We're finally, Google Business Profile data in GA4. You can now report directly on your local search data with your Google Business Profile in GA4. Why it's taken this long to do this, I don't know. You basically need to connect the two services. Obviously, you have to. It says here you have to be an administrator or an editor or an owner or whatever. Like, obviously, you can see correlations between things. You can now cross-reference data for local data versus non-local data. You kind of gain insights into how people visit your website from your GBP, and then how they then explore the rest of your site. If you've ever seen, like user funnels and looking through user tracking data and things like that, you need to link the two and then create new reports. There is already be a new report in your GA4. You don't need to go out and do this manually. You can then get data on things like interactions, website clicks, calls, people asking for directions, messages, bookings, menus if you're a restaurant as well. And they're giving you 6 months of data for your Google Business Profile. Again, pretty handy, pretty nice to see there. You can also link multiple profiles. So if you have a business that is franchised or you have multiple branches, you can link them all to a single GA4 and report from there. If you're using something like Data Studio, we use that for our reporting here at Google, for example. This means you, for the first time, you can pull in Google Business Profile data directly into Data Studio using a data source from GA4. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a pretty big deal. You have now so much more power and flexibility to understand and process the data from Google Business Profile compared to the relative lack of transparency you had with the previous little like performance insights and things like that. Very cool. You'll be able to basically get into a bunch of things. There's a few different limitations here. They explain, you can't use them in like custom explorations or comparisons or anything like that. You can't filter it or anything like that. You can't use like custom filters or anything like that. The only problem with connecting multiple Google Business profiles is that it pulls through aggregated data across all of them. You can't then separate it out. So be careful if you're doing that. If you want to connect all of, like I said, all the different branches or franchises or whatever it is, you can't then separate it out and say, okay, now branch number 1 is doing this, branch number 2 is doing that. It will collate and compile all of the data into a single report. So be careful with that. And yeah, I think this is just interesting stuff. If you're doing local SEO, you're almost certainly using Google Business Profile, right? And this is, like I said, basically gives you the power to report so much more clearly and more impactfully when it comes to your local search data, and you're getting it from Google Business Profile, as you should. You should be getting your data from Google Business Profile. As someone who's done a lot of local SEO in my career, hugely relevant, hugely important. I've already had conversations with a couple of friends who run local businesses, and I was like, I know you don't care about all my like SEO stuff. Trust me, you'll want to do this. Do it now, and you can worry about it later. Because it is a real thing of like, if you don't link it now, you don't get the backtrack of data. And that's often the case. We talk so much about when the swap happened from Universal Analytics to GA4, or when you connect anything to anything, get it set up as soon as possible. BigQuery, big enough. If you're looking to archive your data, that's a huge factor as well. Get the link set up sooner rather than later, so you will have historic data. You can fiddle around and update it later on, but start that initial link, like as I was saying about Bing Webmaster Tools earlier, do it yesterday. Get it done as soon as possible, so you will have as much data as you possibly can for future reports, future discussions, and future analysis. I think that's something that goes overlooked quite a lot, and I think that's something that more of us need to be aware of. Don't get me wrong, I have totally been guilty of this myself, of, I'll set it up eventually, it'll be fine, and then it's not fine, and we have to, get things set up. Right, on to our last story here, which is an interesting one. We're going to kind of come away from a bit of the direct search stuff, and we're going to talk about some legalities. This is thedecoder.com, and it says landmark German ruling declares Google AI overviews are Google's own words and makes it liable for false answers. I think I've referred to this a couple of times in podcast episodes since, because it feels like more people should be talking about this. This is a huge deal. And obviously my partner is German, and I am always like paying attention to what's happening politically and culturally in Germany and stuff like that. But this, respect to the Germans, respect to, the EU and European Commission and things like that in general, they seem to be the companies, the organizations and the countries that are calling out Google and these huge conglomerates and corporations for the dodgy stuff they're doing with AI and LLMs. So I'll give you key points and then I'll go through my takes as well. A German regional court has ruled that Google is directly liable for false claims in AI-generated search overviews. In this case, Google's AI had wrongly linked two publishers to scams and shady business practices. The court treated the AI overviews as Google's own content and rejected Google's argument that users were responsible for fact-checking the rules themselves. So this is important because false information, incorrect information, the example here where it was the scam and dodgy business stuff can cause some pretty serious brand reputation damage when actually you didn't do any of that. You can be found liable for that now, thanks to Google. And Google's argument was, it's not our content. It's generated from other people's content. We didn't write that technically. It's pulled from different sources. And we have a little disclaimer that is like, go and fact check this yourselves. And what this ruling says is, no, Google, it is your content. You have marketed this. You have branded this. You have labeled it AI overviews, AI mode. You have labeled it Gemini and all that kind of stuff as a Google product. So the results of that Google product are your problem legally. And also, doing a little, oh, sorry, LLM sometimes hallucinate and get things wrong, isn't enough to cover your ass legally. Even 91% of accuracy means millions of wrong answers. What a brilliant statement there. And I think that is really interesting, because Google basically came back with a bunch of data like, yeah, well, it's like 91% accurate. It's so accurate most of the time and da-da-da-da-da. But then they also talk about, well, now there's 1 billion users using this thing. Well, then that's quite a lot of people. That's millions and millions of wrong things. I think this is really interesting. The argument that Google had here was that the company says AI overviews are designed to reflect information that already exists. Reflect is such a dodgy choice of words from Google. Like, come on. Oh, sorry, yes, we're just reflecting other people's content. We know what you're doing here. It's very clear that you scrape and take other people's content, present it as your own in AI overviews and AI mode, because you label it as Google products. You're not reflecting other people's writing. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I think this is particularly interesting, and they're basically saying like, well, it's basically like traditional search results. And the court said, no, it's not. People know that, this is a search, but they don't necessarily have to look into it. They shouldn't need to verify their own searches. You should be the source of information if that's how you're that's how you're declaring this, essentially. So I think this is big for Google. Whether this becomes a bigger deal, the reasoning here, the users can check for themselves defense. The court replied that basically users almost never click on sources in AI overviews. It's like, yeah, they can, but they don't. So shut up. It's very, very very cheeky by Google, very sneaky by Google. And I thought this was really interesting as well. Free speech protection. And I'll read this section because I thought it was interesting. As if the rest wasn't bad enough for Google, the court also went after free speech protection for AI-generated content. And AI's opinion is, and I quote, not the expression of an acquired conviction of the person expressing it, but result of an algorithm, according to the court. Offering AI-powered research is, above all, an expression of Google's business activities, unquote, and, quote, at most, a secondary expression of an interest in being able to freely express one's opinion and beliefs. When weighing the plaintiff's privacy rights against Google's interests, Google had to take a backseat, especially since the challenge statements were based on untrue facts. The AI had linked the plaintiffs to companies that, according to sworn affidavits, had no connection to them whatsoever. So, what this, I think, essentially says is we could see this escalate. This could become a much bigger story. The little section in the end there is saying this may reach international courts as well. And whether this is enough for Google to kind of take a step back a little bit, and whether this may, cascade onto other AI search and LLM platforms. Will this affect OpenAI? Will this affect Anthropic? I think it's a really big, interesting question, and this could be the thing that stops the AI search bubble, the recent growth and surge of AI search in this industry, if they are being fully held accountable for the things that are being published, reflecting the information from the internet, the things that are being generated by these LLMs, then a lot of companies like OpenAI, like Google, like Anthropic could get into some legal hot water incredibly quickly. Will that be enough to stop them? Will that be enough to slow them down? I don't know whether this will go to an international court. I think it will, personally. I have seen how dogged, and I mean that in an entirely affectionate way, how determined companies like the ICO and the European Commission are for going after this kind of stuff. They have been repeatedly bringing up, a thing we have in the UK is the Digital Markets Act, which is a anti-monopoly thing that Google has been battling recently as well. It has been relentless. It has been, here is another thing. You have reached this thing. You have not done enough to reach the minimum thresholds. You need to sort this out over and over and over again. It's happened a few times already since the act was passed. We're going to see this more and more. And I think the more that these companies are held accountable, the less quickly they can grow without fully testing and doing all this kind of stuff. I think it's really interesting. I think this could be a absolute game changer. That's why I thought it was worth sharing, even if it's not directly, literally SEO news. This could have a huge impact on the future of search as we know it. So that is pretty much this week's episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed some of the most important news topics. Obviously, we covered everything from preferred sources to Google profiles to search generative reporting in GA4 to connecting your Google business profile to GA4 to AI visibility insights in Bing Webmaster Tools and the potential legalities that may stop all of this AI search stuff expanding so quickly. I will put links for every single article I've talked about and showed on screen in the video description and the show notes down below, so please do go and read them in full. Go and check them out. As always, I do briefly skim through them and give you the highlights. So if you do want any extra research, or let me know, basically let me know if you're interested in clicking through and doing extra reading. In the meantime, I'll be back in the next couple of weeks. I've got a couple of guests. I've got Ellie and Liv from Digital Loft coming up. Mark will be back here in the studio. I've got a couple of my fellow Candour colleagues, Brendan and designer, one of our lead designers, Mark Salisbury, will be joining us in a new in-studio style episode. And I'm also working on a mini-series, essentially, focused on AI search. If there are any topics you would like for us to discuss on AI search, if there are any experts that you want, or guests you want me to get on the show to discuss AI search and specific topics, I've already started a list of guests and a list of topics. I now need to kind of cross-reference them, but I'm looking for recommendations. And you folks, the viewers and the listeners at home, please do let me know who you want to see and who you want to hear on the show in our AI search mini-series coming up later this year. I, of course, will be back next week. If you haven't already and you're in the UK and you want to come and check it out, Search Norwich XL is happening on the 24th of September 2026. Come and check it out. I'll put a link for the tickets down below, searchnorwich.org if you want to get that. And you can get 25% off your tickets by using the code podcast, the discount code podcast, to get 25% off your ticket prices. So I'll put that link in the show notes. You can go and check that out. Come and check out our amazing lineup for our SEO conference that is happening in September. We have Google's Martin Splitt, we have Daniel Foley-Carter, we have Charlie Martin, we have Julia Panozzo, we have Arnett Hellmans, we have Estella Franco, we have all these amazing people coming to Norwich one day. It's going to be an amazing event. Come and check it out in September. Tickets are just £125, but they're less than 100 if you use the code podcast. So come and join us, come and check it out, and hopefully I will see you in person. Come and say hello in person to me, Mark, and the team in September. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you next week. Have a lovely week.